2JZ engine. No, shockingly, I have another often requested engine on this channel. Toyota's infamous 2JZ. Now, before you get too excited, this is not the twin turbo version found in the Supra. This is the variable valve timing version from a GS300. These engines were also found in the Lexus IS300 and in late SC300s. And all things aside, these are really good engines in factory form. I know these don't make a ton of power. They're like 220 horsepower, which in an IS is pretty good. In a GS, it's a little underwhelming, and SCs are okay as well. But I really like these engines in factory form. Not saying that modding them is wrong. Plenty of people build these engines. What's going to happen with this engine. I've sold several of these engines over the years, and I can tell you every single one got swapped into something it originally didn't come from, and most of them had big turbos bolted to them, which seems to be the norm. That's what's going to happen here, because one of my employees bought this engine from another yard to use in his IS300, and he's going to build it or rebuild it, and it's going to see some boost. I have no idea what the condition of this engine is. The yard had no idea. They had no key. I did a Carfax on the 05 GS this came from, and it has around 140, 150,000 miles on it. So I expect a good engine, but you really don't know. People can break absolutely anything, as we've seen on this channel. There was a point in time where you could buy one of these naturally aspirated variable valve timing 2Js for just a few $100, and a few $100 got you an engine with lower miles and a guarantee. Back then, a lot of people passed on these variable valve timing engines because they were harder to tune. They didn't make cams for them. A lot of the parts that fit on the non-variable valve timing engines won't fit these, and they're generally thought of as the weaker of the bunch. But now, it's hard to find a naturally aspirated non-variable valve timing, a 97 and older engine. Those are getting tougher to find, and what's out there is either more expensive or a giant question mark. These are going away. I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, but these are getting older. The newest one is from 2005. So if you ever had a plan on building a 2J and it didn't matter what you started with, snag one of these while you can. There are still some cheap, naturally aspirated variable valve timing engines out there, but that's not going to last forever. So my advice, pick one up now. Well, the very first thing we're going to do, let's see if it turns over. Still got plugs in it, so there should be compression. Well, it turns over. Oh, I'm feeling some compression. Not a lot, though. It is a big breaker bar. Yeah. I think we're all right here. Getting a better look at this thing. It looks pretty complete. The harness has been cut.
I have no idea why you would cut the harness. And then somebody jammed a rag where the throttle body goes. I guess it was talking too much.
We're going to get the plugs out of this, and to do that, we have to pull this cover off and then pull the wasted spark coils out. Yeah, we'll get that done. This also allows us to look at the timing belt, which looks really good. I don't see any cracks. It's not shiny like one of the idlers is. Got a stiff bearing. Looks good. What do these say here? All oil and lubricating fluid has been drained. We'll see about that. All right, let's get this off of here. Oh no! The boot. All right, let's continuing here. I guess they're all leaving parts of them behind. Hey, there's one. Well, this thing's definitely been leaking for quite some time, which is good. That means that they had oil in it. Let's see if we can get these plugs out of here. Use some extra force here. And my 10's gone forever. These plugs are absolutely filthy because the valley they were sitting in was filled with fluid. So we're gonna... My can is dying here. Now let's give us kind of a look. So they're all the same plug, which is a good sign. I don't see any no signs of malice in the combustion palace. All the straps look good. All the electrodes look good. They're Densos, so they're a good plug. I don't see any issues yet. Next, we're going to remove the power steering pump. Next, we're going to remove some of this bracing. Holds the intake up. Just get this out of the way. And now, the dipstick. The dipstick. It's out. Now we're going to spend a little more time pulling bolts out that hold the harness down. And there's some connectors we're going to undo. Oil pressure sending unit. There's a knock sensor. And get all that stuff done. We're going to pull this harness remnant with the intake manifold, and we're going to pull the intake manifold complete. All right, let's get some bolts out. Oh, come on. I think my battery's running low. Yep, we're going to get a new battery here in a minute. Okay, now it should just come right off. Got hose here. Oh, it's loose. Oh, well, that was easy. Well, the intake port looks pretty good. Top of the valves are clean. There's no signs of debris or anything. Those valves are open. Get out of the way, hose. Always in the way. Yep. So far, so good. Next, we'll get this upper timing cover out of the way. Next, we'll get the Serpentine belt tensioner. We're going to peel the valve cover off first because that's going to really tell us a lot about the condition of this engine. These aren't very tight. Oh no, that one broke. Well, that's a good sign. That looks really nice. Well, this is looking pretty good. I actually noticed there's one more 12 millimeter up here. And then this comes off. Now let's try to get this crank pulley bolt out. And this might fight us. Or not. It could just come right out. Now, that might be more challenging. I think this is the first Japanese engine that I've had to use a puller on the crank pulley. And of course, I lost the end piece for this puller. This puller's been through hell. I think it's time for a new one, but we're gonna use this anyway. I actually need to give this a little tap, get that socket all the way on there. It's gonna be fine. Take care of your tooling, guys. Oh, it's gonna be like that, okay. She's off. Now it's time to remove the water pump pulley and the lower timing cover. Well, that's not a good sign. So the bottom of that cover is melted, like it was near a flame or a heat source. But it's more on the outside than it is on the inside, which tells me it wasn't the engine that got hot. It could have been the yard using a torch. I don't know why you need a torch up there. Oh well, that cover's junk. This is an incredibly simple timing system. It looks like the timing belt's been replaced. You've got your tensioner here, the idler here that tensions the axle belt, and there's no other pulleys. This is as simple as it gets. Now let's start getting the cam gears off. First, we'll get the intake cam, which has the variable valve timing. Okay, now I gotta keep everything together since this engine will someday go back together. Next, this backing plate. It's got a vacuum line running through it. There's a banjo filter for the variable valve timing, and there's a little bit of debris in there. It's not bad though. Looks pretty good. Now it's time to cap the cam caps loose. Alrighty then.
Alrighty then.
Alright, well now I can get all the caps loose or out. Now on the intake cam, there are 2 additional 5mm Allen bolts I need to take out. Now we can unbolt the cam caps. Okay, well, this is still very stuck, so we'll give it a couple little taps. There we are. Well, the cam journals look perfect. I don't see any signs of issues whatsoever. The oil that's there looks pretty clean as well. So as you would expect, the cams look pretty good, although I suspect these will not be reused in this build. Cam caps have a little bit of wear, but nothing abnormal. Now let's get this timing belt idler and tensioner off. Now we can start taking some of the bolts out of the water pump. Okay, I got all the bolts out. Oh, we're leaking. So the water pump looks pretty decent. There's not a lot of rust in here. Some barnacles growing, but these are pretty cool because that's the weep hole. They actually have a hose built in. This looks pretty decent. Just don't look where my hand is. So don't look. It's not PG-13. Okay, water pump housing is off. Okay, now it's time to crack the head bolts loose. The head bolts are a triple square. I think the earlier ones are a hex head, which I do not like for head bolts. Those are easy to strip out, but triple squares for head bolts, that's all right with me. Come on, that one's really tight. Okay, it's time to lift ahead manually. Well, there seems to be some foreign matter in the form of liquid. Head gasket looks okay. Not too shabby. Well, I don't really know what's on top of these pistons, but I'm going to go with it's a mixture of oil and water. Is it oil? Probably so. The bores look really nice. I don't see any signs of rust, which is odd considering this engine was likely stored outside. Or maybe it just came right out of the car. I have no idea how long it was sitting for. The head also looks pretty good, albeit pretty dirty. That is not a chipped valve, that's just some buildup. I don't see anything jumping out at me. So far, so good. Now we're going to turn this thing upside down, and we're going to see if it's actually drained. You guys want to take bets? I bet it'll be most of the way drained. To be fair, they probably meant oil. Oh, there's some oil. There's more oil. It's not a lot, though. All right, let's get this lower pan off. Looks pretty normal in here. Smells like gasoline and Toyota. It's a good mix. Don't see anything wrong yet. Inside of the pan, hardly anything worth mentioning. There's oil in there. Now we'll remove the pickup and this baffle. Now it's time to remove the upper oil pan. Okay, I think that's all of the bolts out of this. We're gonna give it a couple taps. Looks like I need some pry in action too. Looks like an oil pan. Well, everything looks pretty good, but I can tell that there's a bunch of oil sitting in the pistons. So we're going to have to rotate this short block over again just to pour all that out. But I don't see anything too terrible. It all looks pretty clean in here. Let's turn this over and see if I can avoid a future mess. Well, it did not work as planned. I had to clean up the mess I just made. Use a little bit of pig mat. This stuff is like a staple here at this shop. I'm not calling my guys messy, but yeah, they're messy. It's a messy job. Now it's time to remove the oil pump. To do that, got to remove the sprocket. To do that, take this off. And there we go. And don't worry, I'm saving every bit of hardware from this engine, all of it. And there's the oil pump. I'm not going to be taking this apart. Didn't see any signs of lack of lubrication, so I don't see any reason to take this apart. So here's the oil pump. It all looks like it's in pretty good shape. We didn't see any signs of lack of lubrication or oil starvation, so there's no real need to take this apart. Now let's turn this crank over and see how everything feels. Once this gets tight, I mean, feels really nice actually. We're going to start at the front. Of course, you always want to start at the front. I think we can get this out without pulling the crank pretty easily. Now for number 2, which feels a lot more solid. Turn this over a little further. Now we can get next 2. Well, the rod bearings look really good. There's a few scratches here and there, but these look really nice. And the rods and pistons look pretty good too, although I'm pretty sure these aren't going to get reused. A lot of carbon on the top of the pistons. This likely wasn't a car that was driven very hard, because typically when you flog them from time to time, give them the old Italian tune-up, you don't see that kind of carbon on the top of the pistons, but virtually no skirt wear. The skirts look beautiful. It's a nice set of rods and pistons. I don't know if they have any value, but again, this isn't my motor, so we're not selling parts from it anyway. Now I'm going to crack the main caps loose, and normally I would just hit it with the impact, but you guys seem to really like the sound this makes. All right, this crank should come right out. As we could have predicted, the main bearings look pretty much perfect. Even for 150,000 miles, these bearings look great. And the crank looks perfect as well. There's no damage to any of the journals. It's rare that I pull a crank out of an engine on this channel and it looks perfect. Though I do hope that this groove doesn't cause a rear main seal leak. Sometimes that seal will wear a groove in the back of the crank, and then you'll have to adjust the position of the rear main seal to keep it from leaking. Well, I think he did pretty good here. Cross hatching in the block looks great. I don't see hardly any vertical scratches. This thing looks fantastic. This might be the nicest motor I ever tore down on the channel. I think he did pretty good here. This engine was just $250 delivered. You didn't have to pull it. Sure, there was a risk associated with it, as there is with anything without a guarantee. A lot of yards get cars in without keys. They don't have a way to program them, or the time to do it, or the labor to do it. There's a host of reasons why yards don't run engines, but typically those yards sell engines a lot cheaper because there's an inherent risk. But with a 2J, that risk is a little lower. Those are really good engines in factory form. I've only seen a couple of bad ones, and they're typically from neglect and misuse. This engine is in outstanding condition. It doesn't need any major machine work, which is ideal for something that you're going to build from. Anything that you'd want to do to this engine at this point would be elective, which is exactly what you want. Now, using a VVT engine for a high power situation, maybe that's less than ideal. The tuning aspect can be a challenge, and passing emissions with an OBD2 vehicle, that can also be a challenge, but there's not a lot of choices out there anymore. Sure, on the West Coast and down south where cars last a lot longer, you may see a lot more of these engines still around, but we don't really see non-VVT engines here in the Midwest. I do not see them. I don't really have any parts to sell from this because all of them are his, and he got free labor out of it too. What a deal. But if you'd like to buy parts off of anything else I've torn down, I'm going to leave our email in the video description. You can also go to importapart.com and peruse what we've got listed there. And if you don't see what you want, you can always fill out the part request form, which sends us an email with what you're looking for, and we'll see if we've got it. Now, on a personal note, I've got just a couple weeks left before my second kid is born, and you really won't see a disruption in this channel because I've kind of saved up some videos preparing for this, but you won't see any car updates until next month. I don't have the time. Someone invent a time machine, please, so that I have more time to shoot videos and edit videos, and I also need someone to do that as well. That clock is ticking. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this teardown, and as always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one. And special thanks to my friend Nick for letting me shoot a short little quip with his Mark IV Supra.